Today's topic is about being like a girl. There was a video I watched this morning by a tampon company that we'll have the link in the description, that was asked women to act out, and women and men to act out things like run like a girl, fight like a girl, and they showed all these adults doing these comical, humorous, like and they showed these young girls who were passionate and strong and running as hard as they could, and there's just this really poignant juxtaposition of a cultural story of judgment, of lesser than thoughts about half the population, about women. And there's been an overhanging cultural dialogue over the last few months about the plight of being a woman in our culture. The term rape culture has come up a bunch of times, which really rubs me the wrong way, because it's hard for me to sit with the fact that I'm a part of that. But as I've been listening to some of these dialogues, and I've been listening to some of the conversations, and I've been hearing women explain their experience, I'm slowly starting to understand what it means. Slowly starting to understand the challenges of being a woman, of being a girl, of growing up female. Now, I was raised by an amazing woman. My mother is fantastic. I'm so grateful and so lucky. And she is a bit of a feminist. And so I've always identified with being a feminist. And growing up in the 70s, and it says she and her friends wore their Birkenstocks, and I learned about the birds and the bees from books that had unshaved pits by all those involved. And I really, in some ways, I was kind of pendulum swinging the alternate direction, away from the old traditional macho guys. And my parents were made a big point to not raise their child in macho ways, and tried to discourage them or even judge macho-ness, to the point that it actually had consequences to me that weren't always positive. For example, I was so afraid of being like an obnoxious guy that I never asked women out. I would see guys like walk up to girls in bars, and I just like, wow, like what a pig, what a jerk, you know. And meanwhile, I would just be shy and say nothing. And it really came to affect me. It's funny how small things will have deep consequences. But my mom, was very good about encouraging dialogue in our family about sexuality and about masturbation. She gave me a few books about learning about sexuality, probably a year or two before I should have had them. And it was very clear to me that women's pleasure was important, and that a guy who is only focused on his own pleasure is a jerk. And so I used to be paranoid, so scared of not pleasing a woman. Now, the fear existed years before I was actually with a woman, to the point that throughout like high school, I was a virgin until my prom night, but even so, before every big party, I would masturbate first, so that just in case I had a chance with a woman, I wouldn't climax too quickly. A lot of over-preparation during those years, but I was scared. And then when I eventually did become sexually active, and not that active, sporadically, occasionally active in college, and the years after that, I had a real challenge reaching completion, which is not as common amongst men as it is with women. In fact, most women would kind of laugh when I brought it up and say, well, you haven't been with me yet. And it was rough, actually, because it's almost it's just known that, you know, especially young guys, you come too quickly. And when I often would not come at all, many of my early partners, you know, their egos were hurt. They felt that they didn't turn me on, or they weren't pretty, or whatever it was. And I really was just so scared of letting them down. I was so scared of being that macho guy, of not being the sensitive man that I've been, you know, trained and was supposed to want it to be. And that was the case for many years. And I remember that a turning point when I worked with a woman after college who confessed to me a bunch of her fantasies. We were just, you know, we were working late, and it wasn't flirty. We were just talking about, you know, where our minds were at, often in the gutter. But I didn't realize how dark the gutters could get, and I always thought that you know, like, I never used the word FCK. I always said make love, make love, make love, even though what I was probably doing was fumble around naked. But that being said, I just thought, you know, it was so, like, you know, a sensitive man makes love. And when there's conversations with this woman who is brilliant and just had all this respect for her, she explained to me about how certain elements of her fantasies were quite dark and involved degradation and involved, you know, power play and spanking and choking and all these things. And I was just like, what? And I realized in that moment that that there are parts of you that are reptilian and core, and you don't have a lot of control over. And so the best you can do is try to work with those things. And it is in a loving space. If you find a partner that you can trust, you can go to these dark places and tickle these areas of you that trigger these reptilian responses, and it can be a very beautiful thing. You can love someone completely and call them a slut, you know, or worse. You can have absolute respect for their body and choke them and spank them out of love. And it was a real, like, shift for me to recognize the complexity that can happen when you respect someone and understand that they're not two-dimensional and that we all have these fluctuations. But I'm getting a little off track. I'm more trying to give context to my feelings. So all of this, I have this self-identity of a feminist, of a hardcore feminist, of a, you know, in the spectrum of masculinity, I'm practically female. And so in these recent dialogues about rape culture and about the struggles of being a woman, and I kind of feel like, well, that doesn't apply to me, you know, like, you know. And then I listened to some of the stories and people talking about what it's like to, you know, every woman has heard catcalls, every woman has had things said to them, and it's hard for a guy to understand, because we're so rarely objectified. And as a young boy, I remember thinking, God, I wish I was a girl. It would be so easy to be a girl, because you would never have to ask a girl out. You wouldn't have to go through that embarrassment of asking a girl out. They would ask you out, and you could, man, girls can get laid anytime they want, you know. And then I remember during you know, I was lonely and shy for many years, and if you find me in the right time, I'm still very shy. But when I discovered the internet and a webcam, sometime in my mid-20s, I started dancing around with my shirt off in front of a webcam and had women in a chat room hooting at me and saying, you know, trashy but adorable things to me that made my ego all big. I mean, I was being objectified like so many women are, and I loved it. Loved it. And I wondered, you know, I knew at the time that it's different, you know. If you're a woman and you're always being objectified, that's different. You know, it's kind of like the reason why there's not white parades is because whites are always in power. They don't need to march. Men are never objectified. They don't need to fight for it. And I think it's only been in recent years, and sometimes some of this recent dialogue, that I've really understood the penetrating, bad word choice, the infiltrating effects of a culture that is so sexualizes women. And I realize that I have so much of this in myself too. I mean, I don't act on it, I don't hoot at people, but I see people as sexual beings way more than I wish I did. And it's gotta be scary to know that if I'm having thoughts like that, and I'm practically a woman and, quite fragile, but there's big, beefy, less evolved men having these thoughts and projecting them onto you all the time, that has got to be terrifying. And so I feel like I almost owe an apology for not being more understanding and for not being more overtly challenging male-female identities and roles in our culture. And there's a lot of things that I try to overtly attack. I got pink down as far as status quo judgments that I'm working on, but I think I can do some more work on the feminine and on honoring women and on honoring the differences and the importance of feminine energy, and on women in pretty much everything. I am so aware of the presence and the gifts of women in my life. I mean, so much of who I am is my mother, and the way that she loves, and the way that she protects, and the way that she projects love into her relationships and into people. And at the same time, my family dynamic is one where my dad is powerful and my mom is soft and loving. And that dynamic works, and it's beautiful, and it also has effects on, or has had effects on me. And I'm working on it. I'm working on assumptions and judgments and analyzing beliefs that I have. And so as I know that I have them, I know that the culture has them. And so I want to be on the side of the solution. And I want to be vocal about recognizing the presence of things, issues, attitudes that cloud our ability to be truly present with one another. I mean, I think about how, I was having, there's a restaurant that I eat here all the time, and there's one of the, well, several, but there's one waitress who's quite attractive, and someone in the office said, "Oh, did you hear that the waitress is pregnant?" And I'm like, "Oh, that's awesome." And so the next time I went to eat there, I was much friendlier with her, because there was a part of me that thought, oh, I don't have to worry about the sexual tension anymore, or whatever I've created, or my nervousness of I have to be on my best behavior, or every woman is a possible sexual being, and but in this situation, she's recently pregnant, she's not thinking about me as a sexual conquest. So it's cool, I can just joke around and be friendly with her. And then someone said, "Oh, no, not that waitress, that waitress." And I was like, how crazy, how dramatic my interactions changed with someone when I put aside them as a sexual being. Now, truthfully, as I get older I have much more control of those urges and feelings, and they are much less strong and present, and you know, a good Netflix marathon sometimes is every bit as exciting. Well, my point is that I think it's really important to be aware of the things in our culture that have yet to be fixed. I think, you know, some things are obvious. Gay attitudes are obvious. Colors of skin attitudes are obvious. And the female-male interactions are sometimes so deep, I think require a little bit more work. And so I'm dedicated to being better. And if for all the women here that can hear my voice right now, I honor your path and recognize the inherent struggles. And I am so appreciative of the feminine energy, of the compassion, the love, the presence that women have in my life and in the world. Thank you. I love you. Let's have a hug. Grab yourself by the shoulders. You know that this body you're feeling, this body was born of a woman. So let us be grateful for the miracles of this physical body, and be aware that it is a shell atop our other shell of our personality that makes our beliefs. One of those identities that we cling to that identifies us and defines us is man, is woman. But that is just a label. Yes, it affects the production of certain enzymes and chemicals in us, and it affects our metabolism, and it affects the way our genitals dangle. But that's a minor part of the equation. In the depths of who we are is beyond masculine and feminine. In the depths of who we are bright, shining, loving entities. We are cells in the cosmic organism. And it is that place that we can call upon, that we can identify with, and see all beings as brother, as sister, as I. And so as we identify and appreciate this body that we're in, this consciousness that we hold and experience, we recognize that every single person that we interact with is a reflection of the divine. Whatever their sex, whatever their gender, whatever their color, these are all perfect reflections of our own divine light. So let's take 3 breaths, just being one little cell of this cosmic organism, in through the nose. On behalf of Grandpa Caleb, Grandma Carol, Mom Susie, and all the love warriors, Happy Hug Nation, thank you. I love you. Namaste.